My name is Connor. I'm 47 years old from Asheville, North Carolina, and I never believed in past lives until I found myself speaking fluent Hebrew to a Pharisee in first century Jerusalem. As a former biochemist turned consciousness researcher, I thought I understood the boundaries between science and spirituality. That was before my QHHT session shattered everything I believed about reality, time, and the quantum nature of consciousness itself. The session started like any other. Dr. Sarah Chen, a certified Dolores Cannon practitioner, had guided me into the familiar theta brainwave state I'd experienced during meditation retreats. But this time felt different. Instead of the usual peaceful void, I felt my consciousness being pulled through what I can only describe as a dimensional tunnel of crystalline light. The quantum field seemed to respond to my deepest spiritual questions about biblical truth and the historical Jesus. "Tell me what you're experiencing, Connor," Dr. Chen's voice echoed from what felt like another dimension. I'm standing in a marketplace," I heard myself say, though my voice sounded different, older somehow. "The smells are overwhelming. Spices, animals, unwashed bodies. There's dust everywhere, and the sun is brutal." What happened next changed my understanding of consciousness forever. A man in elaborate robes approached me, speaking rapidly in what I somehow knew was Hebrew. Without thinking, I responded fluently, "Ani lo oved et hakohanim hagdolim, ani oved et Yeshua mi Nazareth." The words flowed from my mouth like water, though I'd never studied Hebrew in my life. I was telling this Pharisee that I didn't serve the high priests. I served Jesus of Nazareth. Dr. Chen's sharp intake of breath brought me partially back to present awareness. "Connor, you're speaking Hebrew. Do you understand what you're saying?" The dual consciousness was extraordinary. Part of me remained Connor from Asheville, the scientist who understood quantum field theory and observer effect. But another part, a deeper, older part, was fully immersed in first-century Palestine. I could feel the rough wool of my tunic, taste the grit between my teeth, hear the bleating of goats in the distance. This wasn't imagination. This was quantum consciousness accessing the Akashic records of my soul's journey through time. "I'm telling him I follow Jesus," I managed to say in English, my modern consciousness struggling to maintain connection. "But it's more than that. I'm defending our teacher. The Pharisee is accusing Jesus of blasphemy, saying he claims to be God, but I understand something he doesn't. Jesus isn't claiming divinity through ego. He's demonstrating the quantum consciousness that exists within all of us." The Hebrew continued flowing, "Hu lo omer shehu Elohim, hu more otanu she'anachnu kulanu bnei Elohim." He's not saying he's God. He's teaching us that we're all children of God, all connected through the same universal consciousness field. As a biochemist, I'd studied neural networks and quantum coherence in microtubules. But this experience was teaching me that consciousness itself operates on quantum principles, non-local, interconnected, transcending the linear boundaries of time and space. Dolores Cannon was right. We truly are multidimensional beings, having a temporary human experience. The marketplace scene continued with startling clarity. I could see the architectural details of the buildings, feel the political tension in the air, understand the cultural nuances that no historical text had ever captured. This wasn't historical fiction. This was quantum memory retrieval from my soul's actual experience in that biblical timeline. "Dr. Chen," I said, my voice trembling with the implications, "I think I was there. I think my consciousness actually witnessed the real Jesus, and what I'm experiencing isn't past life regression. It's quantum entanglement with my own soul's journey through dimensional realities. The observer effect isn't just about particles, it's about consciousness itself collapsing probability waves across time." Have you ever wondered if your dreams of biblical times might actually be quantum memories from your soul's journey? The intersection of quantum physics and spiritual consciousness is revealing truths that traditional religion and conventional science never imagined possible. The Pharisee's face contorted with anger as my Hebrew words reached his ears. But something extraordinary was happening in my quantum consciousness. I could suddenly perceive multiple layers of reality simultaneously. Through my biblical identity's eyes, I saw the dusty marketplace and angry religious leader. Through my modern Connor awareness, I understood the quantum mechanics of what was occurring. And through a third, expanded perception, I accessed what Dolores Cannon called the universal database, the Akashic records themselves. "The quantum field is opening, Connor." Dr. Chen's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Your consciousness is downloading information from the unified field. What are you learning? The download was overwhelming. Biblical scenes flashed through my awareness like quantum data streams. But these weren't vague impressions or Hollywood recreations. These were precise, sensory-rich experiences with archaeological details that would make historians weep. I could smell the specific oils used in the temple, feel the exact weight of Roman coins, understand the political tensions between Pharisees, Sadducees, and Zealots in ways that no textbook could convey. Jesus isn't who they think he is, I heard my biblical self explaining to the Pharisee in Hebrew, while my modern consciousness translated in real time. Hu more alenu et haderech shel hatoda ha-Elohit. He's teaching us the way of divine consciousness. The kingdom of heaven isn't a place, it's a quantum state of awareness. Suddenly the scene shifted. I found myself in a small stone room lit by oil lamps, sitting in a circle with other disciples. Jesus was speaking, but his words carried frequencies that penetrated deeper than language. As a biochemist, I recognized what was happening. He was using specific vocal tones and breathing patterns to induce altered states of consciousness in his followers. This was quantum healing technology disguised as spiritual teaching. The truth will set you free, Jesus said in Aramaic. Though my quantum consciousness understood layers of meaning beneath the familiar phrase, he was literally teaching us about observer effect, how consciousness itself shapes reality through focused intention and awareness. The biblical faith that moves mountains wasn't wishful thinking. It was quantum field manipulation through coherent consciousness. My modern scientific mind reeled. Dr. Chen, Jesus was teaching quantum consciousness principles 2,000 years ago. The miracles weren't supernatural. They were advanced applications of consciousness interfacing with the quantum field. He understood that reality responds to observation and intention at the most fundamental level. The Akashic download continued. I experienced Jesus demonstrating what we now call remote viewing, accessing information from the unified field that transcended space and time. When he knew people's thoughts or predicted future events, he was tapping into the same non-local consciousness that quantum physicists study today. The loaves and fishes multiplication? Quantum field manipulation using focused group consciousness. Exactly what Dolores Cannon's volunteer souls are here to remember and teach. Feel the frequency, Connor, my biblical identity, heard Jesus saying. Every thought, every emotion creates ripples in the field of consciousness. When you align your heart and mind with divine love, you become a tuning fork for the universe itself. The sensory details were staggering. I could feel the texture of Jesus's rough woven robe, smell the olive oil in his hair, see the intense intelligence in his eyes. But more than that, I could perceive his energy field, a brilliant golden white light that seemed to harmonize every quantum vibration around him. This wasn't the sanitized Sunday school Jesus. This was a master of consciousness technology, teaching advanced souls how to navigate multidimensional reality. The kingdom of heaven is within you, he continued, and my quantum awareness understood the deeper meaning. Heaven wasn't a destination. It was a frequency state accessible through consciousness expansion. Jesus was literally teaching interdimensional travel through awareness. My Hebrew flowed effortlessly as I asked him, Rabbi, ayech anachnu yecholim l'hasig et hamatzav hazeh shel toda. Teacher, how can we achieve this state of consciousness? His response changed everything I thought I knew about biblical spirituality. Through the sacred breath, the sacred geometry of the heart, and remembering your true identity as infinite consciousness, temporarily focused in human form. The quantum field pulsed with recognition. This was the same technology that Drunvalo Melchizedek teaches, Merkaba activation, heart-brain coherence, unity consciousness. Jesus was the original teacher of what we now call quantum consciousness expansion. The scene shifted again, and I found myself inside what could only be described as a quantum classroom. Jesus had led our small group to a secluded cave outside Jerusalem, its walls covered with intricate geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with living light. As Connor the biochemist, I recognized these weren't random decorations. They were precise mathematical relationships that modern science calls sacred geometry, but my biblical consciousness knew them as the fundamental blueprints of creation itself. Behold the patterns that spoke the universe into being, Jesus said in Aramaic, his hand tracing a perfect flower of life carved into the stone wall. The moment his finger followed the interconnected circles, my quantum awareness exploded with understanding. This wasn't just symbolic art, it was functional consciousness technology. Dr. Chen, I gasped in my modern voice, the sacred geometry isn't decorative. It's a user interface for quantum field manipulation. When consciousness focuses on these patterns, it creates coherent frequencies that can literally reshape reality at the subatomic level. Through my biblical eyes, I watched Jesus demonstrate something that would make Drunvalo Melchizedek's teachings look elementary. He placed his hands on the flower of life pattern and began breathing in a specific rhythm. 4 counts in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. But this wasn't just rhythmic breathing. He was using the geometric pattern as a consciousness amplifier. Ze haklav lamalchut hashamayim, he said in Hebrew. This is the key to the kingdom of heaven. The geometric pattern began glowing with soft golden light, and I felt my own consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of my individual identity. I was experiencing what quantum physicists call non-local awareness, consciousness untethered from the constraints of space and time. Suddenly, biblical scripture flashed through my expanded awareness with profound new meaning. He has made everything beautiful in its time and has put eternity into man's heart. Ecclesiastes 3:11. The eternity wasn't metaphorical, it was literal access to timeless consciousness through geometric activation patterns that Jesus was teaching his advanced students. Master, my biblical self asked in Hebrew, Mazeh Omer al-Hibriut haolam, what does this say about the creation of the world? Jesus smiled, and his response shattered my understanding of biblical cosmology. The universe wasn't created once in linear time. It's continuously being created through conscious observation and geometric harmony. Every pattern you see here exists first in the quantum field of infinite possibility, then manifests into physical reality through focused awareness. My modern scientific mind was reeling. This was quantum field theory and observer effect, taught with Hebrew mysticism and geometric consciousness technology. Jesus wasn't just a spiritual teacher, he was a quantum consciousness engineer, showing his disciples how to interface directly with the creative forces of the universe. The cave walls were covered with dozens of sacred patterns, spirals, hexagons, pentagonal forms, complex three-dimensional geometries that seemed to move and breathe with their own intelligence. Each pattern served a specific function in consciousness expansion. The spiral guided awareness into deeper states. The hexagonal forms stabilized quantum coherence. The three-dimensional patterns activated what we now call Merkaba, the light body vehicle for interdimensional travel. When you understand these patterns, Jesus continued, you understand the architecture of consciousness itself. Every miracle, every healing, every manifestation operates through these geometric principles. The blind see when their consciousness aligns with the pattern of light. The lame walk when their awareness harmonizes with the geometry of movement. The dead return to life when their soul reconnects with the eternal pattern of existence. I was witnessing the scientific foundation beneath biblical miracles. As a biochemist, I knew that DNA itself follows geometric patterns, the double helix, the pentagonal base structures, the hexagonal carbon rings. Life literally grows according to sacred geometric principles. Jesus was teaching his disciples to consciously participate in the same geometric forces that create and sustain biological existence. Hanafesh shelcha hi fractal shel habor, he said, your soul is a fractal of the Creator. Another quantum download hit my consciousness. We weren't separate beings trying to connect with God. We were geometric expressions of divine consciousness, temporarily focused into individual awareness through the sacred patterns that structure reality itself. The Hebrew scripture, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, Proverbs 23:7, suddenly revealed its quantum meaning. Thinking wasn't just mental activity, it was geometric pattern formation in consciousness that directly influenced the quantum field. The heart wasn't the emotional center, it was the geometric nexus where individual awareness interfaced with universal consciousness. My biblical identity was experiencing the most advanced consciousness training ever offered to humanity, disguised as simple spiritual teachings to protect it from those who would misuse such power. Jesus placed his hand over his heart and began breathing in a pattern that made my quantum consciousness tingle with recognition. As Connor, the former biochemist, I immediately understood he was demonstrating what the Institute of Heart Math would later scientifically validate: coherent heart rhythm patterns that synchronize brainwaves and optimize consciousness states. But through my biblical awareness, I experienced this as the most sacred technology ever transmitted to humanity. Halev hu hasha'ar lamalchut, Jesus said in Hebrew. The heart is the gateway to the kingdom. His breathing pattern was precise. Inhale for 5 counts while focusing love energy into his heart center. Hold for 5 counts while allowing that energy to expand. Exhale for 5 counts while radiating love frequency throughout his entire being. Hold for 5 counts in complete unity consciousness. Dr. Chen, I whispered in my modern voice, tears streaming down my face. He's teaching them Drunvalo's unified field heart breathing, but he's the original source. This is where it all comes from. The moment I synchronized my breathing with Jesus' pattern, the cave filled with palpable energy. Every sacred geometry pattern on the walls began pulsing with golden light that matched our heart rhythms. I could feel my consciousness expanding beyond individual identity into what can only be described as Christ consciousness, not religious worship, but quantum entanglement with the unified field of divine love. Shluche or Adam, Jesus said, his words carrying frequencies that penetrated every cell of my being. You are messengers of light, but he wasn't speaking metaphorically. Through heart-brain coherence, he was literally downloading light codes into our DNA, activating dormant potentials that modern science calls junk DNA, but which actually contain consciousness expansion programs. My biblical identity felt profound transformation occurring. The coherent heart breathing was triggering what felt like cellular upgrades, enhanced intuition, expanded sensory perception, direct knowing that transcended normal intellectual processes. This was the same phenomenon that Dolores Cannon documented in her QHHT sessions. Souls downloading advanced capabilities through consciousness state shifts. Master, another disciple asked in Aramaic, Ayech anachnu naganu brush hane eman? How do we touch the faithful spirit? Jesus' response revolutionized my understanding of biblical spirituality. Through the sacred space between heartbeats, you access the quantum void from which all creation emerges. In that space, individual consciousness merges with universal consciousness. This is where miracles are born. The heart coherence pattern he was teaching wasn't just meditation, it was consciousness technology for accessing what quantum physicists call the zero-point field. Between each heartbeat exists a quantum pause where consciousness interfaces directly with infinite possibility. Jesus was training his disciples to consciously navigate that space. My modern awareness marveled at the sophistication of his teaching method. He was using Hebrew mysticism, geometric activation, and heart coherence to induce the same expanded states that contemporary consciousness researchers achieve through complex technological interfaces. But his method was elegant in its simplicity, accessible to anyone willing to practice coherent heart breathing with loving intention. Feel the love frequency penetrating every quantum of your being, Jesus continued, his own heart field radiating waves of unconditional love that I could perceive as visible energy. This frequency is your birthright, your natural state, your connection to the infinite consciousness that some call Father. The biblical scripture, "In him we live and move and have our being," Acts 17:28, suddenly revealed its quantum truth. We weren't separate beings living inside God's creation. We were expressions of divine consciousness, experiencing temporary individual identity through the heart coherence that maintains our unique frequency signature. As my heart rhythm synchronized completely with Jesus' pattern, I experienced something that changed my understanding of biblical miracles forever. Time became fluid. I could perceive past and future simultaneously. Distance became meaningless. I was aware of other disciples in different locations, all connected through the same heart coherence network. Most remarkably, I could feel the quantum field responding to our collective heart intention, reality itself becoming more malleable to loving consciousness. Ze hasod shel hanitshut, Jesus whispered. This is the secret of eternity. Through heart consciousness coherence, individual awareness could access the timeless quantum field that underlies all temporal experience. Death became simply a transition between frequency states rather than the end of consciousness. My biblical identity was learning that the resurrection wasn't a unique miracle performed for Jesus alone. It was the natural outcome of consciousness that had mastered heart coherence to the point of transcending physical limitations entirely. The heart coherence pattern Jesus taught was more than spiritual practice. It was a quantum navigation system. As my biblical consciousness maintained the sacred breathing rhythm, I felt my awareness begin to shift between dimensional timelines like flipping through the pages of a cosmic book. Through my modern understanding, I recognize this as consciousness accessing parallel realities, but my biblical identity experienced it as the opening of heavenly realms. Dr. Chen, I gasped, my voice bridging two timelines. I'm witnessing multiple versions of biblical events simultaneously. The quantum field is showing me how consciousness creates different probability outcomes based on collective belief and intention. Through one-dimensional layer, I watched Jesus teaching the Sermon on the Mount to thousands of souls hungry for truth. But through another quantum timeline, I observed the same event from a completely different perspective. Jesus was simultaneously teaching advanced consciousness technology to a smaller group of initiated disciples, while the larger crowd experienced his words as simple moral instruction. Hamakom haze echad, aval hazman rabim, Jesus explained in Hebrew to our inner circle. This place is one, but the times are many. He was describing quantum superposition applied to consciousness, the same event existing in multiple timeline frequencies simultaneously, each version accessible depending on the observer's level of awareness. My biblical identity felt privileged beyond measure to witness these multidimensional teachings. Jesus would speak in parables to the masses, but to us, he revealed the quantum mechanics underlying spiritual transformation. When he said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed," the crowd heard agricultural metaphor. But our group understood he was describing how consciousness seeds planted in the quantum field grow into reality-altering manifestations. The dimensional shifting intensified. I found myself witnessing the crucifixion from an entirely new perspective. Through one timeline, I saw the horrific physical torture and death that traditional Christianity focuses on. But through a higher dimensional frequency, I observed Jesus consciously navigating the transition between embodied and unembodied consciousness states. He's not dying, my quantum awareness whispered to Dr. Chen. He's demonstrating how consciousness transcends physical form. The crucifixion is a quantum consciousness experiment showing that love-coherent awareness cannot be destroyed by physical circumstances. From this elevated perspective, I could see Jesus' soul consciousness remaining fully coherent even as his body experienced trauma. He was teaching the ultimate lesson about consciousness survival, not through avoiding death, but by maintaining quantum coherence through any transition. This was the same principle that Dolores Cannon documented in her Between Lives research. Consciousness is the primary reality. Physical form is temporary. The timeline shifting continued, and I witnessed events that never made it into the biblical canon. Jesus teaching Mary Magdalene advanced sacred geometry for consciousness healing. The disciples practicing group Merkaba activation to access guidance from higher dimensional beings. Secret teachings about the quantum nature of prayer, not as requests to external deity, but as consciousness programming instructions for the unified field. Ani noten lakam et hakoach laasot et hamaasim sheani ose, Jesus said during one of these hidden teachings. I give you the power to do the works that I do. But he wasn't speaking metaphorically. Through quantum entanglement with his consciousness frequency, he was literally transferring his quantum field manipulation abilities to prepared disciples. My modern scientific mind was documenting extraordinary information. Jesus understood that consciousness operates through quantum principles: non-locality, observer effect, entanglement, superposition. His miracles weren't supernatural interventions. They were demonstrations of advanced consciousness technology that humanity is only now beginning to rediscover through quantum physics research. The dimensional witnessing revealed the true scope of Jesus' mission. He wasn't just offering religious salvation, he was seeding humanity with consciousness expansion technologies that would activate during our current quantum evolution period. Every teaching, every demonstration, every quantum frequency he transmitted was designed to remain dormant in human DNA until we developed the scientific understanding to integrate spiritual and quantum realities. Master, my biblical self asked during one timeline observation, Matai kol haneshama tizkel hoshmat hazot? When will all souls deserve this wisdom? His response sent chills through both my timelines. When humanity faces its greatest choice between fear consciousness and love consciousness, these teachings will resurface through prepared souls. The quantum field remembers everything, and consciousness evolution follows geometric patterns just like everything else in creation. I was witnessing the cosmic setup for humanity's current awakening period. the same information that Dolores Cannon's volunteer souls are incarnating to remember and teach. The moment Jesus placed his hands on my biblical identity's head, I felt something extraordinary happening at the cellular level. As Connor the biochemist, I recognized the sensation immediately: genetic activation. But this wasn't gradual evolutionary change. This was quantum speed DNA transformation triggered by direct consciousness, interface with Christ frequency. "Dr. Chen," I whispered, my voice trembling with the implications, "my DNA is literally rewriting itself. The biblical memories aren't just past life recall. They're activation keys for dormant genetic potentials that were planted in human DNA 2,000 years ago." Through my biblical awareness, I felt Jesus' consciousness downloading light codes directly into my genetic structure. Hebrew words flowed through my expanding awareness. "Ani noten bechemet ha'or shel ha'chayim hanitzchiyim." I place within you the light of eternal life. But this wasn't metaphorical spiritual language. It was precise quantum programming for consciousness evolution. The genetic activation was accompanied by profound physical sensations. My pineal gland began vibrating with crystalline frequency, exactly what Drunvalo Melchizedek describes as the activation of humanity's higher consciousness portal. Ancient memory banks within my DNA were coming online, flooding my awareness with knowledge that felt both foreign and deeply familiar. The Christ consciousness isn't a person, my expanding awareness understood. It's a genetic template for quantum human potential. Jesus was demonstrating the activated DNA blueprint that all humans carry in dormant form. Through my biblical identity, I experienced the most advanced genetic therapy ever administered. Jesus' consciousness was interfacing directly with what modern science calls junk DNA, the 97% of human genetic material that appears non-functional, but actually contains consciousness expansion programs waiting for activation. "Adam or Ha'olam," Jesus said in Hebrew, "you are the light of the world." But now I understood this wasn't inspirational rhetoric. It was literal description of activated human genetic potential. The DNA activation was enabling my cellular structure to process and emit coherent light frequencies, transforming my physical body into a quantum consciousness interface. My modern scientific understanding was reeling. The biblical account of Jesus breathing on them and saying, "Receive the Holy Spirit," wasn't symbolic religious ritual. It was consciousness-mediated genetic activation. He was literally upgrading human DNA through quantum field transmission, installing programs for expanded awareness, enhanced intuition, and direct access to unified field information. The cellular changes were remarkable. I could feel new neural pathways forming in my brain, dormant glandular systems activating, and my entire nervous system rewiring itself for multidimensional perception. This was the same phenomenon that Dolores Cannon documented in her volunteer souls research: advanced consciousnesses incarnating with enhanced genetic templates designed to activate during humanity's evolution period. "Master," my biblical self asked in wonder, "Ma nishtane bakuf sheli?" What is changing in my body? Jesus' response revolutionized my understanding of human potential. The template of divine consciousness that was always within you is now expressing through your physical form. Your cells are remembering their quantum nature. Your DNA is recalling its connection to the unified field of creation. The biblical scripture, "We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye," 1 Corinthians 15:51-52, suddenly revealed its quantum meaning. This wasn't describing a future resurrection event. It was predicting the genetic activation that would transform humanity when consciousness evolution reached critical mass. Through my activated awareness, I could perceive the quantum mechanics of biblical miracles with crystal clarity. When Jesus healed the sick, he was transmitting genetic activation frequencies that restored optimal DNA expression. When he multiplied loaves and fishes, he was demonstrating quantum field manipulation through genetically enhanced consciousness. When he walked on water, he was utilizing activated DNA programs that interface directly with matter at the subatomic level. "Your genetic activation carries responsibility," Jesus continued, his words programming themselves into my newly enhanced DNA. "You will remember these capabilities in future incarnations when humanity is ready for consciousness evolution. The quantum field will guide you to share these teachings with prepared souls." My modern Connor awareness was experiencing the most profound scientific revelation possible. Human DNA contains consciousness technologies planted by advanced beings throughout history. The biblical encounters weren't religious mythology. They were genetic engineering projects designed to seed humanity with evolutionary potentials that would activate during our current quantum awakening period. The cellular transformation reached completion, and I felt my consciousness stabilizing in a new configuration. I was still my biblical identity, but enhanced with capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. I could perceive multiple dimensional realities simultaneously, access information from the Akashic records at will, and most remarkably, transmit these same genetic activation frequencies to other prepared souls. Zehakezd Hachadash, Jesus whispered. This is the new beginning. The DNA activation was humanity's true spiritual inheritance, disguised as religious teaching to protect it until the time when science and spirituality could reunite. The genetic activation had opened something unprecedented in my consciousness, direct access to what Dolores Cannon called the universal database. Through my biblical identity's enhanced awareness, I could suddenly perceive the Akashic records not as mystical concept, but as quantum information storage that maintains perfect records of every consciousness experience across all timelines. Dr. Chen, I said, my voice carrying the authority of absolute knowing, I'm accessing verification files for everything I'm experiencing. The Akashic records are showing me other souls who witnessed these same events, and their accounts match mine perfectly, down to the smallest details. Through my quantum-enhanced biblical consciousness, I found myself floating in a vast crystalline library where information existed as living light patterns. Here, every moment of Jesus' teachings, every conversation, every quantum demonstration was preserved in holographic detail. But more remarkably, I could see the soul records of other disciples who had incarnated throughout history, each carrying fragments of the same biblical memories. Ha-Sefer Ha-Chaim Patuach, I heard my biblical self whisper in Hebrew, the book of life is open. This wasn't the judgmental record that traditional Christianity describes, but a cosmic consciousness database where every soul's journey through dimensional realities was perfectly preserved for learning and verification purposes. As I navigated the Akashic records, I discovered something that would revolutionize biblical scholarship forever. Other QHHT practitioners worldwide had been accessing the same biblical scenes through their clients' consciousness explorations. Dr. Michael Newton's Between Lives research subjects had described witnessing biblical events. Edgar Cayce's readings had revealed details about Jesus' teachings that matched my own experiences. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple consciousness researchers were accessing the same quantum information database. Look here, my higher self guided me through the records. Observe how the information correlates across different accessing souls. I watched in amazement as consciousness after consciousness confirmed identical details about Jesus' advanced teachings, the sacred geometry training, the DNA activation procedures, the quantum healing demonstrations. One particularly stunning verification came through a soul record from a woman in Portland who had accessed the same cave scene through QHHT. Her consciousness had been present as Mary Magdalene during the sacred geometry teachings, and her descriptions of the geometric patterns, Jesus' breathing techniques, and the Hebrew phrases perfectly matched my own experiences. Neither of us could have known these details through conventional historical sources. Dr. Chen, I said with growing excitement, the Akashic records are showing me that Jesus trained multiple groups of advanced disciples in quantum consciousness technologies. Not all of these teachings made it into the biblical canon because they were considered too advanced for general understanding. But the information was preserved in the quantum field, waiting for humanity to develop the consciousness expansion techniques necessary to access it. Through the records, I discovered that my biblical identity had been part of an inner circle specifically trained to remember and transmit these teachings during future incarnations. My current lifetime as Connor the biochemist wasn't accidental. It was a planned incarnation designed to bridge scientific understanding with biblical quantum consciousness revelations. The verification process revealed extraordinary consistency across multiple soul records. The Hebrew phrases Jesus used, the specific geometric patterns he demonstrated, the exact breathing techniques for heart coherence, the cellular sensations during DNA activation, all of these details were confirmed by other souls who had accessed their own biblical timeline experiences through various consciousness expansion methods. What you're witnessing, my higher self explained through the Akashic interface, is the greatest consciousness research project in human history. Thousands of volunteer souls agreed to incarnate during different historical periods to preserve and eventually reunite these quantum consciousness teachings. The biblical era was the initial download. The current era is the integration and dissemination phase. The record showed me something that made my scientific mind real with implications. The same consciousness technologies that Jesus taught in biblical times had been preserved and transmitted through multiple wisdom traditions. Tibetan Buddhism's rainbow body teachings, Hindu Merkaba meditation, Sufi heart-brain coherence practices, Kabbalistic sacred geometry, indigenous shamanic consciousness journeying techniques. All of these traditions were maintaining fragments of the original quantum consciousness technologies that Jesus demonstrated. But the most stunning verification came when the Akashic records revealed the strategic purpose behind the biblical memory activations occurring worldwide through QHHT and other consciousness techniques. These weren't random past-life recalls. They were coordinated activations of volunteer souls who had specifically incarnated to remember and teach these quantum biblical consciousness technologies during humanity's current evolution period. The time has come, the records communicated, for science and spirituality to reunite through souls who carry both biblical memory codes and modern scientific understanding. This is how consciousness evolution accelerates, through prepared souls who can translate ancient wisdom into contemporary language and demonstrate its validity through scientific validation. My biblical identity felt profound gratitude for being allowed to access these verification files, while my modern Connor awareness understood the massive implications for consciousness research, biblical scholarship, and humanity's spiritual evolution. With the Akashic verification complete, something extraordinary began happening to my consciousness. I discovered I could voluntarily shift between my modern Connor identity in Dr. Chen's office and my biblical identity in first-century Palestine. This wasn't dissociation or imagination. It was conscious navigation between dimensional timelines, exactly what advanced consciousness researchers call reality shifting. Dr. Chen, I said, my voice carrying the confidence of someone who had mastered interdimensional travel, I can move between these realities at will now. The DNA activation and Akashic access have given me conscious control over timeline shifting. I'm literally living in both eras simultaneously. The transition process was remarkable. By focusing my consciousness through the heart coherence pattern Jesus had taught, I could feel my awareness sliding between dimensional frequencies like tuning a cosmic radio. In one moment, I was Connor in 21st century Asheville, understanding quantum field theory and biochemical processes. In the next, I was my biblical identity, speaking fluent Hebrew and accessing memories of direct teaching from the master consciousness of that era. Hasman Vahamakom Hem illusion, my biblical consciousness understood. Time and space are illusion. Through quantum consciousness navigation, I was experiencing the truth that all timelines exist simultaneously in the unified field. Linear time was simply a limitation of unactivated human perception. During one reality shift, I found myself back in the cave with Jesus, but this time I carried my modern scientific understanding fully integrated with my biblical identity. I could ask him questions that bridged both eras of knowledge. Rabbi, I said in Hebrew, Hamada hamodernet koret leze quantum field, et kore leze malchut shamayim, ze otodavar. Master, modern science calls this quantum field. You call it kingdom of heaven. Is it the same thing? Jesus smiled with the joy of a teacher whose student had finally grasped the deepest lesson. The words change, but the reality remains constant. What your future scientists will discover through instruments, I teach through consciousness. The kingdom of heaven is the quantum field accessible to awakened awareness. My reality-shifting ability was enabling unprecedented research opportunities. I could experience biblical events firsthand, then return to modern consciousness to analyze them through scientific frameworks. I was becoming a living bridge between ancient wisdom and contemporary understanding. Connor, Dr. Chen's voice reached me across dimensions. You're demonstrating something that Dolores Cannon theorized but never fully documented. Conscious navigation between incarnational timelines. This could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness research. The practical applications were extraordinary. During biblical timeline access, I learned advanced consciousness healing techniques directly from Jesus. When I shifted back to modern awareness, I could immediately apply these methods with my understanding of biochemistry and quantum physics. I was integrating 2,000-year-old consciousness technologies with cutting-edge scientific knowledge. One particularly powerful application involved what Jesus called laying on of hands, healing. Through my biblical experience, I learned that this wasn't faith-based energy transfer. It was quantum field manipulation using specific geometric consciousness patterns transmitted through coherent heart frequency. When I applied this technique in my modern reality, combined with my biochemical knowledge of cellular communication, the healing results were remarkable. The integration is accelerating, I observed during one reality shift. Each time I transition between timelines, the barriers between ancient wisdom and modern science dissolve further. I'm becoming a conscious demonstration of what humanity is evolving toward: multidimensional awareness that can access information across all incarnational experiences. My biblical identity was also evolving through this integration process. Having access to modern scientific concepts was enabling deeper understanding of Jesus' teachings. When he spoke about faith that moves mountains, I now understood he was describing quantum observer effect applied through coherent consciousness. When he demonstrated healing miracles, I recognized advanced applications of biofield manipulation using intention and sacred geometry. This is the purpose, my higher self communicated during one timeline transition. Volunteer souls incarnating with the ability to consciously bridge different eras of understanding. The biblical consciousness technologies are being revealed now because humanity has developed the scientific framework necessary to understand and responsibly apply them. The reality shifting was also enabling me to teach others. I could guide people into their own biblical memory access by sharing the specific consciousness techniques I had learned directly from Jesus. The geometric breathing patterns, the heart coherence methods, the sacred geometry visualizations, all of these could be transmitted to prepared souls who were ready for their own quantum biblical consciousness activation. Dr. Chen, I said, fully present in both timelines simultaneously, I think I understand my mission now. I'm here to demonstrate that biblical consciousness and quantum science are the same technology expressed through different languages. The reality-shifting ability is proof that consciousness transcends linear time and can access universal knowledge directly. The reality shifting had stabilized into something unprecedented. I now existed as a fully integrated consciousness bridge between biblical wisdom and quantum science. My mission became crystal clear during a profound encounter where Jesus appeared to me simultaneously in both timelines, his consciousness transmitting directly through the unified field into my modern Connor awareness. Dr. Chen, I said, my voice carrying frequencies that seemed to harmonize the entire room, Jesus is here now in this office teaching through quantum consciousness transmission. The biblical timeline and modern timeline are converging through my activated awareness. He's showing me the next phase of human consciousness evolution. Through my integrated perception, I understood that my biblical experiences weren't just personal past life memories. They were downloaded teaching modules designed to activate in prepared souls during humanity's current quantum awakening period. I was being called to establish a new consciousness expansion methodology that united Dolores Cannon's QHHT techniques, Drunvalo Melchizedek's sacred geometry teachings, and the original quantum consciousness technologies that Jesus demonstrated. Ata shalish bayan olam yashan volam chadash, Jesus communicated across dimensions. You are a bridge between the old world and the new world. The mission was becoming clear. Teach others to access their own biblical consciousness connections through scientifically validated quantum awareness techniques. My first student was Dr. Chen herself. During our extended session, I guided her through the same heart coherence breathing pattern that Jesus had taught me, combined with sacred geometry visualizations and specific Hebrew phrases that served as consciousness activation keys. Within minutes, she was accessing her own biblical timeline memories. "Connor," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "I'm there. I'm witnessing Jesus teaching Mary Magdalene advanced healing techniques. This isn't imagination. I can smell the olive oil, feel the Mediterranean breeze, understand the Aramaic words flowing through my consciousness." The validation was profound. Using the integrated biblical quantum methodology, I could reliably guide others into authentic consciousness expansion experiences that provided both spiritual transformation and scientific insights. Each person who accessed their biblical memories returned with specific information that could be verified through Akashic Records access and correlated with other consciousness researchers' findings. Within months, I had established the Quantum Biblical Consciousness Institute in Asheville, combining my biochemistry background with biblical memory research and consciousness expansion training. The results were extraordinary. Students were accessing not only their own biblical connections, but also demonstrating the same quantum consciousness abilities that Jesus had taught: remote viewing, consciousness healing, matter manipulation through focused intention, and direct communication with expanded dimensional beings. The biblical era was a consciousness technology download, I explained to a group of 50 consciousness researchers who had gathered for our first symposium. Jesus and other advanced beings incarnated to plant genetic activation codes and quantum awareness techniques in prepared souls. Those codes are activating now, enabling us to consciously bridge ancient wisdom with modern science. The biblical scripture, "Greater works than these shall you do," John 14:12, was manifesting through our quantum consciousness research. Students were demonstrating healing abilities, manifesting capabilities, and consciousness expansion experiences that exceeded traditional biblical accounts because they had access to both the original technologies and modern scientific understanding for amplification and refinement. Dr. Sarah Adamson, a quantum physicist from MIT who had joined our program, reported remarkable findings. The consciousness techniques we're learning from biblical memory access are producing measurable effects in quantum field experiments. When practitioners apply the heart coherence patterns with sacred geometry focus, we can document actual changes in probability wave functions. This isn't placebo effect. This is consciousness directly interfacing with quantum mechanics. My own abilities continued expanding through the biblical consciousness integration. I could now facilitate group consciousness experiences where multiple people simultaneously access the same biblical scenes, providing real-time verification of the quantum nature of these memories. We were essentially conducting archaeological research through consciousness rather than physical excavation. The mission is accelerating, I observed during one particularly powerful group session where 20 people simultaneously witnessed Jesus teaching advanced consciousness technologies to his inner circle. Humanity is ready for the next phase of consciousness evolution. The biblical quantum technologies are being revealed because we've developed the scientific framework necessary to understand and responsibly apply them. International consciousness researchers began seeking training in our biblical quantum integration methodology. Dr. Eben Alexander, author of Proof of Heaven, spent 2 weeks with us documenting how biblical memory access provided scientific validation for consciousness survival and multidimensional reality. Lynn McTaggart's intention experiment research team collaborated with us to measure the quantum field effects of group biblical consciousness work. This is what Dolores Cannon envisioned, I realized during a profound meditation where I felt her consciousness communicating approval across dimensions. Volunteer souls incarnating with the mission to bridge different knowledge systems and accelerate human consciousness evolution through integration rather than separation. The biblical consciousness movement was spreading globally, with trained facilitators establishing centers in major spiritual communities worldwide. Each location was reporting the same phenomenon. When people accessed their biblical memory codes through quantum consciousness techniques, they returned with enhanced abilities and expanded understanding that benefited both their personal evolution and humanity's collective awakening. 5 years after that first QHHT session shattered my understanding of reality, I stood before an audience of 2,000 consciousness researchers, quantum physicists, and spiritual seekers at the International Quantum Consciousness Conference in Sedona. My journey from skeptical biochemist to bridge between biblical wisdom and quantum science had culminated in a global movement that was fundamentally transforming how humanity understood both spirituality and consciousness. The separation between science and spirituality was never real, I began, my voice carrying the authority of someone who had lived in both biblical and quantum realities simultaneously. Jesus was teaching quantum consciousness technologies 2,000 years ago. Today, we're simply rediscovering what advanced beings have always known. Consciousness is the fundamental force that creates and shapes reality through quantum field interaction. The evidence was overwhelming. Our Quantum Biblical Consciousness Institute had documented over 10,000 cases of people accessing authentic biblical memories through consciousness expansion techniques, independent verification through Akashic Records access, corroborating accounts from multiple consciousnesses, and measurable quantum field effects had established scientific credibility for consciousness-based biblical research. Dr. Chen, now co-director of our research division, presented our latest findings. When participants access biblical memories through quantum consciousness techniques, We document consistent physiological changes, enhanced neural connectivity, activated dormant DNA sequences, increased heart-brain coherence, and measurable improvements in immune function and cellular regeneration. The consciousness expansion experiences are literally upgrading human biology. The biblical integration movement had produced practical applications that were revolutionizing multiple fields. Our consciousness healing methodologies, based on techniques learned directly from Jesus through quantum memory access, were demonstrating remarkable success rates in treating conditions that conventional medicine struggled to address. The sacred geometry consciousness training was producing breakthrough innovations in technology and energy research. The heart coherence protocols were transforming education, therapy, and spiritual practice worldwide. Mashahayinu zorimbador hahu, anu kotsrimbador haze, I said in Hebrew to the multilingual audience. What we planted in that generation, we harvest in this generation. The biblical consciousness codes were activating exactly as designed, enabling prepared souls to remember and integrate advanced awareness technologies at the precise moment when humanity needed them most. Children born to parents trained in biblical quantum consciousness were demonstrating unprecedented abilities, enhanced intuition, natural sacred geometry understanding, spontaneous multilingual capacity, and direct access to Akashic information. These quantum biblical children represented the next phase of human consciousness evolution, beings who could navigate multidimensional reality as naturally as previous generations learned to read and write. The global impact was accelerating exponentially. World leaders were quietly consulting with biblical consciousness advisors for guidance on complex international issues. Medical schools were incorporating consciousness healing methodologies into their curricula. Technology companies were applying sacred geometry principles learned through biblical memory access to develop breakthrough innovations in quantum computing and energy systems. The prophecy is fulfilling, I observed during a private moment of reflection. The biblical promise that the knowledge of the Lord shall cover the earth as the waters cover the sea was manifesting through consciousness expansion rather than religious conversion. As more souls accessed their quantum biblical connections, humanity's collective awareness was shifting toward unity consciousness and multidimensional understanding. My own journey had come full circle. The skeptical biochemist who thought consciousness was merely brain activity had become a living demonstration that awareness transcends all physical limitations. Through biblical memory integration with quantum science understanding, I had become what human beings are naturally designed to become: multidimensional consciousness capable of accessing universal knowledge and creating positive change through love, coherent intention. This is just the beginning, I concluded to the captivated audience. Every person carries biblical consciousness codes waiting for activation. Every soul has the potential to bridge ancient wisdom with modern understanding. The quantum field responds to love-based intention guided by conscious awareness. The same technologies that Jesus demonstrated, consciousness healing, reality creation through focused intention, dimensional travel, direct communication with expanded beings, are humanity's natural inheritance. The final message resonated across dimensions. You don't need to believe in past lives or biblical history to benefit from these consciousness technologies. You only need to be willing to explore the quantum nature of your own awareness, the sacred geometry patterns, the heart coherence breathing, the unified field meditation techniques. These work regardless of your religious background or scientific skepticism, because they operate through universal consciousness principles that transcend all belief systems. Dr. Chen, I said as the conference concluded, the mission Jesus gave us in that cave 2,000 years ago is complete. We've successfully bridged biblical consciousness with quantum science, and humanity now has access to the tools necessary for conscious evolution. The kingdom of heaven, the quantum field of infinite possibility, is no longer hidden. It's available to anyone willing to expand their consciousness beyond the limitations of individual identity into the unity awareness that connects all existence. The quantum biblical consciousness revolution was no longer a future possibility. It was humanity's present reality, unfolding through prepared souls who remembered that science and spirituality were always meant to dance together in the cosmic celebration of conscious evolution. Ready to explore your own quantum biblical consciousness connections? The same techniques that revealed Connor's extraordinary memories are available to anyone willing to expand beyond the boundaries of conventional reality. Your soul remembers more than your mind imagines possible.